Thank you for joining us today for another great episode of Clean Money. Today, we are continue our series, Tales from the Dark Side of Real Estate, where we share some of the most interesting stories of our adventures in business, as well as other people's adventures, or misadventures is probably the better term. The kinds of stories that are rarely shared. And as you know, it's not all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns in real estate, even though social media makes us want to think that. So I hope you enjoy the show. Leave your comments below and let us know what disasters you've seen or been involved with. And here we go. All right. Today, my co-host, Jesse Sells, has a little story to tell us about what he read recently. So I'll turn that over to you with that terrible introduction.
Thanks. Yeah. So usually we talk about our own personal stories, but just so everybody realizes, right? It's just so you realize that this is going around everywhere. And one of these crazy stories I read about recently was about a particular building in San Francisco. Now, to kind of paint picture, San Francisco's had a really rough time. It's actually one of the worst areas in the nation for commercial real estate, specifically office buildings. They had their Salesforce Tower. That's the biggest tower in the entire city. Well, they're, as of last summer, about half occupied, right?
Yeesh.
Which is absolutely crazy. Yeah. Another one, large office building. This one had WeWork in it. WeWork completely left the city because of all this. Turned into 97% vacant. Oh. So we're seeing all this because tech companies make up about 50% of the office spaces there. Think about all these massive companies there that all went to work from home. So one of these.
Or they moved to Texas, by the way, just saying. So we invest in Texas. There's a reason why we invest in Texas, and they are here. But yeah, go ahead.
They're all coming. They're all following Elon Musk over here. Yeah. So so this 22-story 22-story office tower in San Francisco was purchased in 2019 for $300 million. And now they're trying to sell it for $60 million.
Woo! That's the wrong direction, folks. That's 300 down to 60 million. That's the you won't see that on social media.
80% discount right there. Yeah. And this is the right road. This is just outside of the financial district. Everything looked right. Right. Except COVID happened. Except life happened. Right. So I was reading this, and the whole time I was thinking, well, what happened to the investors? Like, so I guess, Sam, from your perspective, right? You deal with investors, you put these deals together all the time. What does this look like? What happens to these people?
Well, let's just do a little bit of math. So our basic rule of thumb is when you're buying a property, you need about 30% of the purchase price in equity. Or it could be a mix of preferred equity, mezzanine debt that comes in different flavors. But let's just say your main lender is only going to cover up to maybe 70%, 75%. Plus, you're going to need to cover closing costs and so forth. So let's say they got this in the days when they could have got a 75% loan. They got 25% down, and they're probably another 5% in closing and fees and everything else. These were probably paid from funds. And so you got, let's just say 35% probably, because in the fund models, the fund managers got to get paid. And then the managers of the fund managers got to get paid. And then the managers of the fund managers got to get paid. And then the operators that they partner with, like us, we got to get paid, and they got to get paid. Everyone's got to get paid in this process, rightfully so, because at the end of the day, somebody loses their money and then other people lose everything. So the ones who actually sign on the note, like I do, I sign on the note, Jesse signs on the notes. We have far more at risk than your regular investor. But that all being said, 35% of $300 million. You want to do that math in your head? 105.
Yeah.
$105 million in equity. All right. So what happens to $105 million in equity? Real estate is not an ATM. You cannot pull your cash right back out if it goes sideways. In fact, we've seen this with Blackstone. We've seen this with others that, people who are like, the commercial market's going off the rails. I want my money back. And they say, nope. Even in the fund models where traditionally they're able to get their money back a little faster, and there's been limits on how much money can be drawn and so forth. So we've seen this recently. That's not been really well advertised in the news, which is a good thing. We don't want to run on the funds because then they shut down, banks shut down and break apart and so forth. We don't want that to happen. Stability is key. In this place, $105 million just went poof into the wind. Now, to sell a property at $60 million, you still have over $200 million in debt on that project. I'm curious if they're willing to sell at 60, which lenders are taking a discount? Meaning, did they have two primary lenders, a first lien, a second lien, and then on these bigger projects, they may have 3 or 4 or 5 liens on this project because they have a first lender, a second lender, a pref equity partner, a mezzanine lender, and it can just be a group of different lenders all together putting the cash together. I'm curious who lost their money completely and who didn't. Regardless, $105 million of investor equity just vanished. Plus, another $140 million of debt just vanished, assuming somebody pays full price of $60 million for this project.
Yeah. And then I keep thinking, so first off, there's no way their plan was to sell in 4 years, right? This kind of a building, this location, you're looking at 10-year holds plus. You're looking for a long hold. So now they're hurting so bad that they have to sell for literally nothing, right? 80% less than the value. People are getting screwed everywhere, right? Investors are losing their money. Lenders are losing their money. I can't imagine. What do you think that monthly payment is? It's got to be over $100,000 a month.
100,000? You mean 100 million a month? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Holy
because the Fed hates America, right? FOMC hates America. I'm just putting it out there. And the media is doing a really good job at deflecting the attention from the Federal Open Market Committee to, Trump. Hey guys, Trump changed the shorts today. That's way more important than what FOMC is doing right now. And we know that FOMC is trying to curb inflation, but what they're doing is they're attacking rates versus attacking supply. So you have this major supply crunch. We can't get supply from China because of COVID. We can't get supplies to America. You have all these policies that have gone into effect once the new administration took over that curb supply in America because, hey, we don't want to farm trees anymore. So we're going to buy all of our pine from Holland, okay, or Canada. But really, like, we were buying studs that came from Holland instead of from America. Like, why are we buying stuff from a tiny country in Europe versus Kansas? So, like, okay, so here we are. Supply costs have skyrocketed. And to get rid of supply, what they've done is they've made supply even more expensive by driving rates up, making it more expensive to do everything, and driving fuel prices up through supply constraints. And now you have all this price increases. And rather than answer the issues with supply by reducing supply constraints that restrict supply, they attack demand because that's what FOMC is able to do. The government should have looked at supply more. They have levers they can use to reduce constraints on supplies, but rather than doing that, they just focus on demand because it's easier for them to make those changes and then push it under the rug so that mainstream America doesn't look at that stuff. Behind the scenes, commercial real estate is toppling. What that's doing is that's toppled banks, it's toppled everything else, and finally is starting to sink down into regular America. because now people can't. I mean, default rates on automobiles are skyrocketing. Default rates on homes has leapt up and skyrocketed. Bankruptcies have skyrocketed. And we haven't seen this kind of stuff since 2008, 2009. But amazingly, this stuff is not in the news very much. It's really every time I watch the news, it's Trump still. Like, I don't care what he wore for breakfast or what. Like, I want to know what's going on in America right now, not what's going on in his life. So I'll keep that off the off the political wagon here, but you can't separate what the feds are doing and how commercial real estate is doing, because they are intertwined completely. And if you raise rates by 500% plus in less than a year without talking about all these other issues or dealing with these other issues, you have major problems like what just happened here. Not only because, look, I'll bring this back home. With that that loan payment probably more than doubled last year. So if your loan payment goes from, let's say, $55 million a month to $115 million or $120 million a month, you can see why people say, okay, we got to sell this thing, because now instead of us losing, we've lost, if we do this, we're going to lose $100 million of investor equity, or we're going to lose $100 million or we're going to lose $50 million a month. At that point, it's worth taking it in the Gipper and getting rid of the project fast.
Yeah. But it brings up another question is, what do we do with all these commercial buildings? If this is a new future, this is a new reality of working from home, which I just don't see it changing, where everybody goes back to the office, right? Mm-hmm. We have all these commercial buildings. I know there's a lot of discussion about retrofitting them, but it's just, most of the time it's not financially, doesn't make sense financially, right? Because you have to do all the plumbing, it's a ton of work just to get this thing retrofitted, if it's possible. So what do we do? And are we looking at vacant buildings that are just going to be obsolete? So to kind of talk about this more, World Economic Forum earlier this year, some executives actually said this: all these unused buildings would have to be converted or demolished. So is that the future? We're just going to start knocking down all these buildings if we can't convert them?
Yeah, that's a great question. My crystal ball says that definitely not Nostradamus, but there will be a major shift in wealth over the next 10 years. I think AI is driving a lot of that. It's possible that a lot of these buildings could be repurposed for, like malls have turned into rack space where they just fill them with computers. Tons and tons of computers. So that could be one thing. They could become, they were used to pulling a lot of power there. Maybe they turn them into data mines for AI, or for making, more Bitcoin to help sustain the world's, organized crime. Those guys need a lot of Bitcoin to operate. And so they've got to mine that stuff like crazy. But it's way cheaper to mine it with slave labor outside of the States than it is in the States. So maybe that's not going to work. That's a great question. Converting them to hotels or apartments is crazy expensive. But if you can buy a big building for 80% of its value, I don't know, maybe it starts looking kind of appetizing to convert over. But because you're right. I mean, we talked to an engineer yesterday about doing the conversion, and it's possible, but it's a ridiculous amount of work and expense to create, turning huge open office spaces into apartments and living areas. But at 80% of the value, maybe the numbers start to make sense.
Yeah, you can finally get that corner office for nothing.
Or nothing. Hey, yeah, if you got your office and you want to go rent something, man, now's the time. Like, I'll give you $500 a month for this 30,000 square feet. Okay. Yeah, maybe not that, but
it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this all changes and how it develops in the next few years, because something's got to give here. So,
yeah, it's going to be interesting. The computer AI and everything else, as you know, I mean, we're doing AI, we're using it. We use it all the time, every day. In fact, we're going to start teaching people how to use AI to make money and drive monetization of their work. But but it will be interesting to see what happens. I don't see everyone coming back to work. I'm not. You're not.
Nope.
I mean, we're working. Well, so that's that's a little bit of our thoughts about what happens if you go from $300 million property down to a $60 million. If you are an investor in that, your money is toast. If you're in a fund where your money is there, you are going to suffer a loss, but it's going to be reduced across the portfolio of those funds. If you're in an office fund, I'm sorry, probably want to move that money into another type of fund before you're out. But fortunately, REITs, those kind of funds don't generally return that great of returns in the first place. They never have. There's way too many fees involved. Much better to go with a syndicator or syndication, and you cut out a bunch of those middle men and women who are taking up your money. All right, that's it for today on this call. Thank you so much for joining Tales from the Dark Side of Real Estate. I am your host, Sam Sells, and this is Jesse Sells, and we will talk to you again. Like, subscribe, let us know about your experiences, and we'll talk to you again soon.